So this is super. We have Franklin Vickers here, former student of mine. Was it actually this term last year?
It was.
Yeah.
Last year.
So it wasn't even a real whole year.
No.
Okay. So what we're doing is I'd love to hear your story, and thank you for the email. It was
Yep.
wonderful. So this is the very class where Franklin was starting to see the potential, okay? And he started to learn the next few classes, but we'll skip over that unless you
Yep.
want to reference
No,
it.
that's it.
So just as a little recap of, I remember we worked on a certain assignment for you, and you seemed to pursue that. How did it all end up?
So just basically at the beginning of the class, I got more and more interested in it. I had read Rich Dad Poor Dad, the example you used up there,
Yeah.
a couple months before the class, and I was pretty interested in trying to
Mhm.
figure out how to do that myself. So after listening to you for a couple months,
Mm-hmm.
I started looking in my own area back home,
Mm-hmm.
and it turned out one of our neighbors was planning on moving to town. He was
Yeah.
kind of an older guy. The
Yeah.
place was pretty run down, so
Right.
me and my dad thought there was an opportunity there to try and flip it.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the house first then. It was a neighbor, and it was, how did you hear about it, and what was the kind of shape in a couple of lines?
Basically, we had bought the farm behind the house a
Okay?
year or two before, so my dad always did chores there, and he would talk to Billy the odd time. So that's how it kind of came up, and
Okay.
he talked to him and just asked him if he'd be interested in selling it to us before he put it on the market.
Right?
So,
Because you were being close and a neighbor and that kind of stuff. That worked out really.
yeah.
So that, let's jump forward a bit. So the conversation started on a real low-key basis. The process started to negotiate. You eventually got a deal.
Yep.
Okay. You are happy to divulge or not divulge whatever you want to, because of course we can all look it up on MLS now anyway.
So,
So you decided on a number. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or what did you do after you got the place? But start with there.
so before we got the place, trying to figure out a number, so we had talked to the one real estate agent. I worked at the golf course. He was my boss a couple of years before that. I just asked him what he thought the property was worth, and
Okay.
he said it would be around 110,000. So before market and everything, we thought we'd go in and ask for 85,000, and knowing that he would say no, but at least trying to get under that 110 range. So we kind of went back and forth a few times. We ended up selling on 95,000.
Okay. So that's great. So a little bit of negotiation tactics in terms of the way you started out. You didn't want to go right for retail. Now, what was your rationale, real briefly, about how you got it down? Because you started way low, but tell us about
Yeah.
the condition of the house.
So the house was really run down. It was an older guy had lived with him by himself for about 20 years with 2 dogs, and the
Yeah.
dogs had made a mess of the place. As soon as you walked into it, it just smelled like.
Oh, I'm getting the idea
Yeah,
now.
I'll tell
Okay,
you,
so,
but
yeah,
that's about
that's
it.
typical though, and those
Yeah.
are opportunities that are out there, okay?
Yeah.
So that was part of what attracted you. What was it, the smell that attracted you, or the
Well,
opportunity?
It didn't attract me, but the opportunity, knowing that no one else was willing to take it on because it was such a big project.
Okay.
So,
So you started seeing in its present form, and if I would point to the discounted cash flow models or the cap rate to say, well, what, i.e., this is its present value. So Franklin, because of his understanding of real estate, thought to himself, all these mind maps, these filters we're learning, right? What does it look like that dump to you as future value? So
Yeah.
tell us how you came about that vision.
so the house was very run down, but the structure of the house was really, like, I really liked the way it looked. It was kind of a cottagey look.
Okay.
Which is perfect in my area because we live in cottage country.
Right.
Nice big bay window up front and stuff. So I knew that if it was fixed up, the house could likely sell for $400,000. But the problem was, it was completely, like everything had to be torn out. Half of the roof of the garage was gone and everything else, so,
So it looked like real dog's breakfast when you got there.
yeah.
Okay, and essentially then, I guess what you're saying is the decorations and some of the structure was bad, but were the bones of the building good, the
Once we
foundation,
got
the
everything
roof
pulled off-
trusses?
Yep,
Yeah.
trusses were fine, the roof was fine too, actually,
Okay.
on the house.
Good,
Cement block walls, so
Oh.
good and sturdy.
Yeah.
Don't have to worry about that. The
Right.
foundation was good.
what about inside, HVAC, plumbing and all that stuff, electrical, how was it out of date or?
It was a little out of date. The plumbing needed to be done. Most of the wiring was all right, but a bit of it definitely needed done.
Okay.
Insulation, we pulled all of that out. So,
Good, so you got the 10% factor on some of those items, you see that, right? Franklin's got the back of his head, don't forget, he's done all this stuff, so he's already looking at where that 10% slotting in his net operating income statement. So, okay, cool. So you decided to take the plunge, you got it at a really good price. So tell us about what happened then at that point. You just basically graduated, were moving back, and then started this project?
Yep.
And the original idea was to do what? The full reno?
The original idea was the full reno. We weren't
Okay.
sure exactly what we were getting into. We figured we'd peel the house back, basically until we got the smell out of it. And just, we weren't really sure what was gonna happen once we started pulling those walls. So, had a few little surprises with that, but overall it wasn't too bad.
Okay, so that's cool, and again, there's that other 5 or 10% factor, right? Because with renos, the first thing we're always afraid of is what happens when you pull the drywall out and the surprise you find behind the wall, right? So not too many, a little bit on the electrical, a little on the plumbing.
Yeah,
But again, they weren't 50% or 100% problems, they were 10 or 20% problems.
little
So you-
problems.
Yeah, you could, or smaller, okay, good. So then, you got into the project, how long did it take you to rip it all out?
So I did it by myself. Like my dad helped me here and there, just
Yeah.
if I was getting like a countertop or something out. But I decided to set labor myself. I figured I had a job at a golf course, minimum wage, so I
Right.
figured I was better off tearing the house out by myself and
Yeah.
put in the sweat equity kind of thing.
So what, how did you make that calculation just briefly? I agree, you know me, I can see it right away, because my mind maps are already doing the numbers, right? You guys did too? But how did it work out? X number of hours, number of weeks and
I
shifts?
didn't keep track
Okay.
exactly. I was still working on the farm with my dad as well, so
Oh, okay.
I couldn't be at it all the time. So it did take probably 3 months to get it completely
Okay.
torn out.
And probably working, what, a third of your time, half
Yeah,
the time
well, I
maybe?
wasn't working
Not
all
full-time.
that much, no.
Right.
It wasn't full-time job.
Interesting, so again, you see, he had to manage his lifestyle. Okay, I just talked to him about when I was gonna do this weekend, and I had to back out because of that little factor at the end. My 10% factor, my lifestyle wasn't fitting the end of the project. It fit the beginning,
Yep.
not the end. So tell me, your project started to change as you went through the first 2 or 3 months? You're getting close to the rip-out stage, you're now what, into midsummer?
Yep, midsummer, probably July,
Yeah.
getting into August, and we had it pretty well pulled out. And that's when we got to the point where we were starting to get quotes for installation, just trying to get a general idea. I'd also talked to another real estate agent, what she appraised the final value as,
Good.
and it was around the same I had, 350 to 400,000.
Nice.
So,
If done in a finished
If
state
done-
to move-in condition?
not top quality, moving condition, nice finishings, but not the best. Like,
Okay.
if the house.
Great comment. You know why I'm looking at that going, yay. Another part of his evaluation of his costing and his 10% factor. If he went for the high end, that's a whole different story than low end or middle of the road.
So, and the property, we figured it was best, like we evaluated that, and it was gonna be best to put in medium
Right,
range.
because he went high end, it was out of context for the neighborhood probably?
There is houses, but
Yeah.
for the size of the house and the property and stuff, it might not have been the best idea.
You
Like,
see
it would
how
have
he's
been-
analyzing that? Okay, the size, go ahead.
Yep,
Yeah.
and just even, we would get better value at the end putting in medium. Like the value we get from putting in the higher end products wouldn't net us as much money as just
Give you the
putting
first
in
better return,
Right.
percentage wise. Okay, so this is decision crunch time, but something happened. What happened at that point? The whole game plan changed, didn't it?
Yeah, well, so we had gotten pulling it out, and me and my dad talked about more. Like, I grew up on a dairy farm. Me and my dad don't know anything about construction, so we got
I
to
beg
a
to
point.
differ now.
We got to a point where we were wondering if we should bring someone in or just flip the gutted house out.
So the next decision is, oh, are we hiring and then trying to map out the whole reconstruction?
Right.
Plus, you might have found a few things on the way that either delayed you a few days or a week, or started to add up the cost of the next renovation as being a whole different cost and planning step.
Yep.
So after that rationale, you did basically another CMA by the sounds of it.
Yep.
To reevaluate the process based on the other agent contractors. How
So
did it turn out?
the agent I talked to about before that gave the final value, I started talking to her what she thought it would be worth gutted out,
Right.
and she told me around 130, 135. But me and my dad thought there was no way it was worth that much. Like vacant lots were selling for like 80, 90,000 in the
Yeah,
area.
right.
And it was a mature lot, like roundabout driveway, so we knew there was definitely some value there. So that's when we started talking to a couple contractors,
Right.
one of them being my old hockey coach, and seeing if he wanted to take over the project.
Yeah.
So we kind of went back and forth with that and ended up selling the project to him. And he's-
Isn't that interesting? So you brought him on kind of as a consultant,
Mhm.
as a contractor, and of course, his insight now could talk about, are we doing high, medium, low? What are the projected looks at the end? Then you talk to the agent or the other people that, it sounds like you had some agent influence on that
Yeah,
one.
that's what,
Okay.
me and my dad kinda had an idea that's what was going on, so.
And we'll talk more about agent influence next time, okay? In other words, it can be quite significant. Okay, now in that case though, you're now going in between all of that data, you're processing the data as to what your future value would be, now based on what? Your amount of work left, probably your time and resources. And the other factor we always forget, oh, if I do it the other way and crystallize my profit now, what can I now do with that next 3 or 4 months of not having to manage or do a renovation?
Right.
I think that turned out pretty good too. So tell us how the answer, how did you get to that decision and what you do?